Hey guys, it's Old Man Wags here with Derek the Pressure Washers. What we're doing today is focusing on one of the most difficult surfaces to clean in the industry. If you look at any of the research, you're going to be all over the place as far as what you can do, what you can't do. What we're talking about today is how to clean a tennis court. The same process is going to apply for a pickleball court. It could apply to an outdoor racquetball court. Anything that's going to be this material is going to be the same process. We're going to show you some quick do's, some quick don'ts. And more importantly, we're going to focus on everything that's going on and what you need to factor in whenever you're looking at a job like this. So let's go ahead and zoom in. We'll take a walk around the court, point out some of the things that we need to really pay attention to, some of the things that we know aren't going to clean up, and some of the things that are kind of going to leave a mess. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll fire up our machines and see what we're doing. All right, so as we do our quick walk around, the reason this is exceptionally important on a court like this, people that have these in private residences and even country clubs that have multiple courts, they tend to be really picky about these because of how expensive they are. So the key here is to get as many before and after shots as you can, so that if someone says, hey, this crack wasn't there when you started, you can say, yes, it was. Here's where we're looking. Same thing as we're going around, you'll see some of the areas that are just sloped down. It's a good thing to note that that's where water is going to be. If we look at this back section, we kind of have a retaining wall along the fence. I know that there's no water that's going to make it past that retaining wall, which means I should probably start in an area up high and work my way all the way down. If you looked at some of the video footage before or some of the shots that we took a few minutes ago, we had all kinds of debris on the field. Really important to get that off because that's going to make a mess when we're going to get this out of here. This entire thing is fenced in, nowhere for it to go, so you have to pick it up and either dump it in the woods in this case, or you can bag and tag it and take it later. As we're walking around the rest of this, we can see some different areas, some different levels, again, some more cracks. Good to take note of all that stuff. We've got different outlines. Anywhere where you're seeing something that really is going to play a factor into what you should and again shouldn't take into cleaning. If we look around some areas, we're going to see some smurl marks where someone has already tried. Right here is a good example. Someone has already taken a pressure washer to this, and basically they realized that this was not the right way to clean something this large, and they realized that this was probably a much more difficult task than they were comfortable taking on, so they stopped, which is probably a good thing because there could potentially be damage under that. Let's keep on walking around the fence. As we walk down here, there is all kinds of different plant life, different vegetation, and unfortunately, this is where our water has to run off. So what do we have to pay attention to? Well, all these rocks right here are a much better option for pushing fluids to that. As we go through this entire thing, these are also some more tougher plants. They're bigger plants, so they're not going to really have the same impact if I shock them with the amount of chemical. One thing that you're going to see in a few minutes, we're going to flood the surface with a minimum of 30 gallons of cleaner here. That's way more than your average size if you're just doing a concrete job like this. The important takeaway from this is there's so much that needs to go onto this to get a drastic result that you really have to be careful with what you're doing. As we look around the rest of this, we've also got a practice board on the back. Nice painted surface. We look up top, there are some holes in it, it's starting to decay. We're not going to want to hit this very hard. I may not even want to throw chemical on it at all, just a little bit light touch up, knock off the loose stuff and kind of move on from there, just based on the condition some of the boards are in. We're walking around the rest of this. Again, we've got notice of more cracks. We've got some more swirl marks from when someone was playing with it. Down in this corner, it also looks like, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little bit more clean here than there is on the rest of the areas. I bet someone tried to chemically treat this already, which again, good sign. They saw the one process wasn't effective. They saw it wasn't working. Zooming back here, they tried a different process and they're moving from there. As we keep on walking, we've obviously got more retaining wall. We've got more going on here. So everything is going to be pushed in this direction. If you look at those more delicate plants, don't quote me on this, but I believe they're hydrangeas. If you were to dump 30 gallons of chemical in that one specific section, you'd have all kinds of problems. If this was in season, there's a good chance they would not come back to life. Right now it's wintertime, it's a little cooler out. I can pre-wet a lot of things. I have some options as to where the runoff's gonna go, so I'm not as worried about it as I potentially could be. As we keep walking around, we realize we are back to our beginning. I kind of have all the overview of what we're about to do. So let's talk process. I'll grab our cleaners and we'll get started. All right, so after looking at our walk around, we can get an idea of what kind of tools we're gonna need. Let's talk about the difference. If we are stripping this court and prepping it to basically get a new top coat on it, you're gonna be using a whole different process. You're gonna be hitting this as hard as possible. You're gonna be using the most aggressive detergents possible. In that context, you'd probably use a heavier mixture of nasty as well as sodium hypochlorite, strip everything off the surface, hit it with 4,000 PSI, whatever comes off, great, and then resurface from there. We're not doing that. Unfortunately, I don't want to demo that either because it would tear up the court, so I'm not going to show you that process, but just know that there is a separate way to do that. What we're going to focus on in this video is showing you the right style surface cleaner to use. In this context, just because it pairs well with my machine, we're going to use a 21-inch silver helix. In addition to that, we have the nozzle set to the right orifice size so that this machine right now only gets 2,000 PSI. I'm going to show you what 2,000 PSI looks like on the surface cleaner. We're going to redo the nozzles. We're going to show you what 1,000 PSI looks like on the surface cleaner. And then we're going to show you what 500 PSI looks like on the surface cleaner. I'll do a couple passes in each one of the corners so it's a little less inconspicuous. And basically, we'll focus from there. In addition to that, our solution that we've chosen for the quart today, we've got 2 buckets of sodium hypochlorite as well as about a gallon of Hellbender. In a moment here, I'm going to take this gallon of Hellbender, separate it between the 2 buckets, give them a good shake, and in theory, I'm going to use one for this side of the quart and one for the other side of the quart. Unfortunately, tennis courts are kind of hard to predict, and I've got twice this amount of chemical in the truck on worst case scenario if I do need it. We're going to go ahead and get started, and basically, we'll see what everything looks like. So one of the things you're going to see in a second is every time I start and stop the surface cleaner, I'll be moving and then I'll squeeze the trigger. The reason this is important, if I stand right here, squeeze the trigger, and then start walking, there's that brief pause where the surface cleaner is just sitting here longer than any other cycle. What you'll see on this type of surface is a perfectly clean circle, and then it'll look like it fades as it goes, and you don't want that on a tennis court because as many times as you're going to have that, it'll look like crap when you're done. So the process that we're going to be following is always be walking, squeeze the trigger, and just keep on walking that entire time. That may require you to move around a little bit while you're doing something different and coming right back to that same position that you started in. But the important thing is not to be resting just like I am right here on the trigger, right? Every time you're squeezing that trigger, you need to be moving before you engage, and then we'll get started. I want to give you that little tip before I fired up the machine because I don't think you'll be able to hear me in a second. So what we just saw right here, just like we were talking about, I did a double pass at 2,000 PSI, a double pass at 1,000 PSI, and a double pass at 500 PSI. Now the way that I did that, I'll explain more in depth in a second, but basically it was just swapping the nozzles on the surface cleaner. The important takeaway from this is what I was trying to accomplish by doing that, all right? Without any detergent, without any chemical on the surface, what actually did damage and what actually was not enough to do anything. If you can't see it on the photo, we're gonna zoom in right here. There's all these black, tiny little dots, all right? Once that dries, that's gonna become even more obvious. Right in the center at my 1,000 PSI, I don't have any of that. You can tell that those black dots are different than what you're seeing right here because I have a slight haze of swirl marks. That's simply because I haven't used any treatment of any kind whatsoever. I was in a little bit of a rush because we're just trying to get the video all set up and get everything taken care of for you to see on camera, but you can see the difference between a slight swirl mark versus it actually taking away some of the surface material. What about our 500 PSI? Well, this did a really nice job, made everything nice and even. Unfortunately, I had to walk so slow that this was almost inefficient at what we were doing. My goal in testing these three is to know exactly what size orifice I need to set up for my surface cleaner and basically pair it from there so I can take on the rest of the court. This 1,000 PSI, what this has just told me is that this is plenty to clean everything without any chemical. As soon as I add the detergent and the chemical to the mix, flood the surface of everything, this 1,000 PSI is going to clean up way faster than that 500 PSI, so I'm saving a little bit of time just by taking those few minutes to do that step there. I'm also not going to damage anything like that 2,000 PSI pass that I've already done. So we are going to go ahead and put our 1,000 PSI nozzles back inside the surface cleaner. Let's zoom in and we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so as we just determined from the last video, we want to set this to 1,000 PSI. I know what nozzles those are ahead of time. I've already said all that stuff. It won't do much good to talk about nozzle size other than basically give you an idea of what we're looking at. If we zoom in right here, we'll notice that each of these nozzles have markings, and we're going to point out two things. You see how these nozzles are different? We have 2 1/4-inch MIGs, which is perfectly fine. They've got the exact same angle, they've got the exact same orifice, but the style's different. This one is a forged head, this one is a pressed-in head. You can kind of see the difference if you really look at the top of them. One of them's flat and basically is more of a square shape up top, whereas this other one is circular and has a fitting that's literally pressed in. What's important here is not the style that you use. What's important is that you're uniform in the style that you use. So instead of having 2 different styles, because what happens is this one is higher than this one, you'll get an uneven clean. You want to have the exact same nozzles in each style. And what we're looking at is putting in the exact same orifice, the exact same fan pattern with the same style. In this case, I've just happened to have chosen a pressed in. Forged head, perfectly fine. I know most people do prefer them, but in this context, there's not much of a difference other than you want these to be uniform in your surface cleaner. so that everything is as clean as possible. We're gonna go ahead and remove these, but you'll kind of get an idea of the process. If you notice, you have a line on each of these heads. You want that to be as flush with the bar as possible. So if my bar is going this way, I want that nozzle to be angled the exact same way. What'll happen is if I turn this a quarter turn, and actually I'll go ahead and do that just so that we're all on the same page and we know what we're talking about. And if we look right here, the orientation used to be like this in line with that bar. I went ahead and turned it like this. Now think about what that fan is gonna look like underwater. If we spray and squeeze the trigger, it'll be like this. That's good, that's gonna make the bar move. This bar is at a set angle and everything's there. If I've turned that, like I just did in this video, my fan is not helping the angle and the momentum, which means we're relying on this one being the right orientation to get it to spin. Once again, not gonna be even, not gonna be uniform, not gonna be what we want for surface cleaning. So key takeaway here, use the same style nozzle, use the same orifice and the same fan for everything that you're set up to do. In this case, I've got a 2 nozzle bar. I want these to be 2 of the exact same orifice, 2 of the exact same nozzle. We'll go ahead and set these up for the right ones. We'll back these out and set these in, and you can see what I mean about setting that angle correctly. All right, so our next step, we've already selected the orifice size for our machine. We know what kind of pressure we're gonna be hitting this surface with. Once again, if this is your first time cleaning a tennis court, I'd encourage you to do your own test just like that and basically replicate the same process for your machine. You want to get things as uniform as possible. Test areas are the best way to do that. The next step, we're going to mix up our chemical. What we're going to do, I'm going to flood the surface using my X-Jet and get everything set up to basically have as many suds on it as possible. I'm going to try to be uniform with that in the direction of everything that I'm cleaning. We'll go from there. In addition to that, I'm going to apply chemical to that other side. Here's where it gets interesting. On that side, we're gonna have at least twice the dwell time that we're gonna have here. The reason for that's important. I'm gonna surface clean this entire area before I do anything with this area. All right, so the next part of this video, we're just gonna apply some soap. Let's go ahead and see our results and go from there. All right, so as we walked through that process, let's kind of sum up everything that we just did. We took a surface cleaner, figured out that 1,000 PSI was ideal for this particular court. We went through, we soaked everything with the same solution. We hit sodium hypochlorite as well as Hellbender onto the surface. We let it soak, We went through and surface cleaned this area. If you notice, the process for surface cleaning was surface clean about 1/3 of the court all the way down, rinse everything the best that I can. Go to the next area, surface clean everything down, rinse everything the best that I can. The reason you're doing that in this particular case is this is very time consuming. You're getting a lot of grit, a lot of dirt, a lot of sand, a lot of algae and organic growth. There's actually so much buildup on the surface cleaner that as I got closer to these edges all the way down, as well as right there by the net where it was just trapping the fluids, it was slowing down the hub of the surface cleaner and actually causing it to take longer to clean. So as you can see right now, there's even some areas I have to touch up that are closer to the net. Now what about the other side? Well, I said we were gonna let that dwell for at least twice the amount of time. I think we probably let that sit for about 3 times the amount of time. And basically, I was trying to go through and power rinse, and just see what kind of results we get. I got pretty decent results for just shocking it and treating it that one time. If we look at the difference, it's pretty drastic, surface clean side versus soft washing side. Yes, I didn't finish rinsing that side, but you kind of get the idea that there's a lot that goes into it and a lot that can be done with just a steady soft wash. That said, it all comes down to really what the customer's expectations are. What are your reasons for cleaning this quart? Do they want it simply to look a little bit better? Soft washing might be ideal. It'll be a little bit faster, might be cheaper for the customer, depending on what the price of SH is in your area. But just know, for this size quart, I went through 30 gallons, and to soft wash that side properly, I probably would have had to put another 60 gallons on that side alone just to treat it properly. If I were to do the entire quart like that, that's a lot of chemical to go through for what is probably 20 years worth of organic growth and buildup from it. In talking to the homeowner a little bit, they have never actually seen it this clean. Some of the colors are obviously popping a little bit more. We'll get you some more shots after it actually dries, but you get the idea of the process that we're trying to follow. You want to soap everything up, let that sit for an adequate amount of time, surface clean, rinse, surface clean, rinse, surface clean, rinse, all the way down the quart itself. If you were looking at this with an expectation in mind and saying, well, yeah, I want it to look absolutely perfect, I want it to do this, I want it to have all this, and I only want to be able to soft wash it, you're probably not going to get the end results that the customer has in mind, because there's 2 things going on over here. We have way better traction on this side than just a standard soft wash is going to do on that side. What's the reason? I'm removing all kinds of dirt that my standard soft wash process just isn't going to be able to tackle on its own. In addition to that, the surface cleaner going through is basically taking out some of the grit from all these cracks that a soft wash machine that's only hitting 300 PSI is probably not going to be able to tackle. Some benefits of just soft washing versus surface cleaning. As we pan out, there were some inconsistencies in what I was going for. Keep in mind, this quart was filthy, hadn't been touched in, I'm going to say, at least 20 years, if not longer, depending on when the quart was built. I also did find evidence that someone has attempted to surface clean this in the past. Once I was surface cleaning, I found some lines that were going the other direction from where I was, which means someone else has attempted to tackle this job before, but it's had so much growth and buildup that that wasn't even visible on the surface. If you look at some of these areas, they came out pretty good. The dark green areas, everything's blending pretty evenly. The light green areas, they're just getting better as they dry up, and we didn't lose too much grit as we go across the surface as far as what we were flushing away. Most of what you saw that was basically being washed down was all the dirt and crap that was just basically being pulled off of this quart. In addition to that, the algae, it traps a lot of contaminants and it's able to pull it with it. So it's safe to say that as we're doing this, there's a couple different processes that you could follow. In an ideal scenario, you're going to go out, test the job, see what makes sense, and you really want to make sure that you have all the tools in your arsenal to tackle a job like this. This was Old Man Wags here with Dirk here, the Pressure Washers. We'd love to hear your feedback in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's kill some dirt.